My name is Stephen James. I am an attorney. I've been an attorney for over 30 years and started off as an assistant district attorney in Kings County, prosecutor, back in 1987. Ever since then, I've opened up my own private practice, and I've been in business since the late 80s. I've seen a lot of criminal cases. I've handled a lot of criminal cases, and I've defended a lot of them, and I've done a lot of matters that were not necessarily criminal cases, but were civil rights cases. And I have not seen anything that's been worse than what's going on right now. This is the worst I've ever seen. And situations that would, like the one depicted in the short video, are the reason why. We are being picked off summarily and individually in our community one by one, incident by incident, and nothing is being done by the courts to stop it. So I wanted to talk today about your rights and how you can know more about your rights when you come in contact with the police. Now, everyone here appears to be relatively young. Is anyone here in the audience over the age of 18? Well, it doesn't show, and that's good. Well, I want to tell you, if you drive and you're over 18 in this state, have you ever had or know of anyone who's had any contact with law enforcement while driving or any other capacity? You don't have to tell me the situation, just if you've heard of people having contact with the police. Okay. And in many of those instances, when that contact is made by the police, and in most of them it's through a traffic incident. Most people who have contact with the police have it through traffic, although some of us have it in other ways. But the most common way and the easiest way for the police to intercept your life is through your driving and through traffic stops. And I want to talk very briefly about how you can help avoid or minimize some of the detrimental outcomes that we've been reading about in social media and in the news and hearing about lately, if it were to happen to you. And I'm not going to speak for a long period of time. I'd rather have you ask questions and address some of your concerns and give you information that way rather than just presuppose certain things you may be interested in by simply talking ad infinitum. I'm not going to do that, but I will like to tell you as a foundation, if you ever stop by the police, the one thing that you have to know is that under the law in this state, and I'm licensed to practice law all over the country. I'm admitted in the state of New York, I'm admitted in Connecticut, I'm admitted in the District of Columbia, and all the federal courts across the country. And recently I even did a case in Medellin, Colombia, which is in South America. So I go all over the place because there's a need. And unfortunately, there are not enough attorneys who care enough to fill that need. So here I am, working all over the place, 7 days a week, sometimes 8 days a week, to serve you better. So what I'd like to say basically is that in this state, what you have to know is when you stop by the police, you're required to give what they call pedigree information. That's your name, your address, and in some instances your date of birth, and of course, if it's a car stop, the car information, the registration, the insurance on the car. And nothing more. You're not required to answer any questions beyond that. You're not required to answer any questions about any investigation that they may have. I'm sure we've often heard people say, oh, the police say you fit the description, or we got a call, or whatever the case may be. And that may not even involve you driving. It can involve you walking down the street or riding on a bicycle, any type of contact where they'll say, well, we got a call about somebody who fit the description of what you're wearing or what you look like, and we want to stop and ask you some questions. Well, guess what? You are only required to give pedigree information. Pedigree simply means your name, your address, and identification. And I want to tell you here and now, without identification, like some sort of governmental issued ID, non-driver's license or driver's license, something of that nature, you can be brought to the station until they identify who you are. So please always remember, try and carry ID with you at all times, especially if you're of legal age. It's actually required. There are laws called the vagrancy laws. And if you don't have identification, the police can use that as a guise or an excuse to take you into custody. You're not under arrest, but you can be taken into custody pending identification of who you are. So to avoid that and interruption of your day, it's advisable to always carry identification. And you're only required to identify yourself to the degree I mentioned. You do not have to answer any questions regarding what they are investigating. You're not required to assist either as a witness or as a target. You're not required to answer any questions as to where you were yesterday, where you're going, what house did you come out of, what building were you in if you're in a complex with a number of buildings, or which apartment you were in if you're in a building when they question you in the lobby. You're not required to answer any of that stuff. Just name, address, and who you are, and that's it. You have a right to remain silent, and I will tell you, as I say in many of my speeches around the country, use that right. Contact an attorney. If you don't know one will be appointed to you until you can get the attorney of your choice. I will give each of you at the end of today a business card from my office. You don't have to hire us, but it will protect you against unnecessary interrogation by the police, in that once you show them that you have an attorney's card and you tell them, this is the attorney that I wish you to call, or I wish to call myself, before you ask me any questions, and you can tell them, I want to answer you. I want to be cooperative. I want to help you, but I cannot until I speak with my attorney, and after that, he and I, she and I, we and you will sit down and have whatever conversation you want. And believe me, that conversation will never happen. They know that. But for you, in a situation where you are alone with the police, you have to tell them, listen, I have this attorney, call him, or let me call him, before you answer any questions. That will protect you from later on someone saying, well, she said this, he said that, when they're in front of a judge, lying on you in many instances. Yes, I'm sorry, but the police do lie. And guess what? The Supreme Court in this country said that's an absolutely fair game. They're entitled to lie to you, but if you lie to them, you can be arrested and charged with a crime called interference with governmental administration, which carries up to a year in prison. So if you're having a conversation with the police officer, they are absolutely, by law, entitled and often do exercise the right to lie to you. They can lie to you about any number of things, and you won't know, in an effort to get you to admit things about yourself. They can say, oh, we have somebody down at the station who's telling us all kinds of things about you. We have a co-defendant who said you were with him on such and such a night doing this, such and such a crime. And it can be completely false. But that's in an effort to get you to tell on yourself. So I say this to you, never speak to the police without counsel, without an attorney present. Because we know what they're entitled and allowed to do to you, and you may not. And we want to protect you from later on becoming in such a knot in a bind that you can't get out of, even innocently. And don't believe the hype that if you're innocent, you have nothing to worry about. That's not true either. And if you don't believe me, take some of those field trips to some of the state prisons or local prisons and speak to people. Not everybody is guilty. And no one cares once you're in the machine. So the trick is to avoid it and never get into that mess by having proper representation as soon as possible in any sort of contact with the police if it comes to that. One other thing I wanted to mention is, when you speak with the police, they're very excitable. Most of them are very afraid of you for whatever reason. They have guns, batons, tasers, mace, belts, dogs sometimes, and usually other police officers with them. And they're still afraid of you, and typically you're by yourself with no weapon, no dog, which they're now, by a ruling of the New York State Supreme Court last week, are allowed to kill your dog if it moves. Now you explain that one. So you will usually have no dogs, no friends, no weapon, just yourself, and they are afraid of you. So when you speak to these people, try to keep the situation calm, even though they're supposed to be the trained ones, and they're supposed to be the ones who have gone to the police academy and who have been trained in sociology to a degree in the police academy and in how to diffuse and keep calm interactions with the citizens to whom they are sworn to protect and to serve. You, the citizen, typically have to do that for your own safety and for your own life and for your own good. So try to always talk to them in a soothing, smooth manner, almost as though you're trying to rock a baby to sleep. If you've ever babysat or had a younger brother or sister or dealt with a child, you know sometimes a soothing voice is what calms them. Well, that's the voice you need when you speak to most police officers who tend to be grown and hostile and mean-spirited and looking for any excuse. And again, don't take my word for anything. Just look at social media and watch the news. You're seeing people left and right, day in and day out, getting killed, losing their lives for absolutely nothing. For nothing. Many times, it's due to some misperception on the part of the murdering officer, and sometimes it's simply some mistake. But you're still just as dead, and nothing still is being done. So you don't want to be that person. So what I would like to do at this point is not just keep talking. I'd like to rather involve you guys, and if you have any questions about what I've said, or any questions about any incidents that may have happened, feel free to interact with me. So anyone have any questions or anything you'd like to add? Kenny?
Who could you name some of the people that you work for, as far as like the cases that you've already won and whatnot, sort of like a little track list?
Okay. I've represented Minister Louis Farrakhan in World Court. There was a case in which the Nation of Islam, Mosque number 7, which is located here in New York, in Manhattan, was infiltrated by the New York City Police Department because they were told that there was someone upstairs. This was during services on one Sunday, early afternoon. They were told that someone was in there with a weapon. Now, if we know anything about the Nation of Islam, one of the premier things that they always espouse is that the brothers and sisters don't carry weapons. Nothing, not even a baton. And they certainly don't have weapons on them when they're in the mosque. In fact, everyone who enters a mosque affiliated with the Nation of Islam is searched, including Minister Farrakhan, including council, including FOI, MGT, which is the Muslims girls training program. Every female, every male, everyone. Babies, everyone is searched. Baby boxes, baby carriages, pamper bags. So no one is in there with the weapon. And that's been a standard since the second resurrection, and even in the first resurrection of the Nation of Islam. No one is allowed in the mosque with a weapon. The police know that. They've infiltrated, and through COINTELPRO from the 60s on through to now, they've definitely watched the nation, and they know that no one's in there with the gun. However, they came in on that pretext, and unceremoniously were not allowed into the mosque, and they were removed by the brothers who had nothing but the force of God in their own hands. And these police officers had all the things I mentioned that they carried. Mace, guns, bats, batons, and they even came with dogs, and a lot of officers at that. And when they were thrown out of the mosque, they didn't like that. Their feelings were hurt. They were embarrassed. Their egos were severely bruised, which doesn't take much to do. And they decided to create a scene, so they cordoned off the street, and at this time I believe it was between 126th and 127th Street in Manhattan, where the other mosque used to be, and rushed the mosque, ended up arresting and assaulting a lot of the brothers who were on post at the front door. Well, anyway, that case resulted in not the police being arrested and charged, but with, of course, the brothers being arrested and charged. And I represented, along with the late attorney William Kunstler, and some of you may not be old enough to remember him, but he was an attorney who represented a lot of people, the Black Panthers and stuff back in the 60s. And at this point, Bill Kunstler was probably in the twilight of his career. He was probably in his late 80s, and he was still practicing because he was very much needed. Well, he and I did those cases successfully, and he passed on after that. However, that was one case, Brother Kenny Carter, I did. Another case, the Korean boycott case, where a young black girl in Brooklyn was accused of stealing a banana from a Korean grocery store while she was walking to school, and the grocer, a female, came out and assaulted her with the butt of a rifle. That led to a boycott in that area of Brooklyn by many of the residents who were then black people, the majority of which were black people, and I represented a lot of the boycotters because that included Sonny Carson, Omolani Clay, Viola Plum, the December 12th movement people. And again, some of you may not be old enough to remember them, but it was a strong force that was spun off from the Black Panther Party. I was involved with the Yusuf Hawkins case, in which a young man was assaulted and killed. Sorry?
No, I had another question. I was waiting.
Let me finish answering his question. I'm not going to run out.
No, sure.
Okay. In Gravesend, Brooklyn, and in Bensonhurst, he was looking for a used vehicle, and when he went to the neighborhood answering a one ad for a car for sale, he was unceremoniously met by some local neighborhood thugs, including Joey Fama and others. John Lester, who recently killed himself, they say as a result of the guilty conscience that was born out of this case, and others who attacked Yusuf Hawkins, cornered him, started questioning what was he doing in their neighborhood, and ultimately in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, on the streets of that neighborhood, they killed him. I was involved in that case. I was involved with a number of cases, Michael Griffith case, Al Sharpton's case. He was indicted for 64 counts by Robert Abrams, who at the time was the New York State Attorney General. He was charged with tax evasion. Al Sharpton, who now has a television program, was not always in favor of the standard bearers of New York State. He wasn't always the darling of the media. He wasn't always the guys whose party you wanted to be at or whose daughter's wedding you wanted to attend, like he is now. He was a person for many years they did not like and spent a lot of energy and effort trying to destroy. And he needed good legal representation, and I had the pleasure and privilege and honor of working along with Alton Maddox, who at the time was Reverend Sharpton's premier attorney in that case. And all 64 counts were ultimately dismissed and he prevailed. That's just a few. I mean, there's a lot of cases.
So,
Yes, sir.
No, my sister first. No, please speak.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
If you're driving and the police siren indicate to stop you and you're on a dark street, at which point should you stop if you're alone?
What was the first part of the question? I'm sorry.
If you're driving and the police want to stop you, they put on the siren to stop you, but it's a lonely road, at which point should you stop?
Thank you. Wonderful question. The question for those in the back who may not have heard was, if you're driving along a lonely road, perhaps late at night, and you're alone, and a female, as the lady is who asked the question, and she notices that the police have on their turret lights or their flashing lights and the sirens to pull you over, should you stop? Well, the rule of thumb is, if it's a so-called unmarked car, drive to the nearest precinct and stop there, because there have been instances where women have been molested, robbed, beaten, kidnapped, and all kinds of other perilous things by people pretending to be cops. And nowadays, who are cops doing it? There was a case in Brooklyn not long ago where a young lady about 2 weeks ago was pulled over with two companions, two males and a young female. She was 18. And the allegation is that the police let the two males go, put her in the back of their squad car, took her to a local park and molested her. And then went on to say that it was consensual, which by law it cannot be, because when you're in custody of the police, no contact with them beyond pedigree information can be consensual. So the rule of thumb is, if it's an unmarked police car, go to the nearest precinct and stop there amongst the precinct. How safe that is? Questionable, but probably safer than being in a dark alley with these people.
Right.
However, if it's a marked police car, you would be required to pull over and to identify yourself, show, if you're driving, show the identification of the vehicle, the registration, your driver's license if you're operating the vehicle. And also, this is what I wanted to tell you. If you're stopped by the police and you're the passenger, not the driver, and sometimes we've all heard situations where the police will say, well, to the passenger, let me see your ID, let me see your driver's license, or let me see whatever. And many times the passenger will say, well, listen, I wasn't driving, or you might have even been sleeping when the car was stopped. You have nothing to do with whatever the driver is alleged to have done. You're not operating a vehicle. Well, in New York State, you still are required to show your ID. Even though you're not operating a vehicle, you don't have to show a driver's license, obviously, but you definitely have to show state-issued ID. That's why I say, even if you're walking down the street, be prepared to have ID on you at all times to avoid the contact. You want to keep the contact with them to a minimum and the tension and the conflict down as best you can. So you want to show ID. You do not have to show a driver's license if you're not driving, but you should be in a position to show identification that's state-issued, just to identify who you are.
Next question.
So you have to show.
Hold up.
Two things. One, so even if you're walking down the block and a police officer stops you, you're required by law to show them your ID?
Good question. If you're walking down the street and the police say to you, we have a call about someone who's walking down the street, dressed the way you are, looking in windows or harassing people who are no longer there, but you are, you do have a requirement by law to identify who you are. Because all they need is a reasonable suspicion. They don't need probable cause, which is a higher level, a higher standard, meaning we have a call of someone who said you committed this act, and the act has to be a felony for the police to stop you if they're not a witness to it. If it's probable suspicion, which is we got a call about someone who's fitting a description, meaning they're stopping everyone who fits that description, not just you, although it's you now, you do have a legal requirement to identify yourself. And nothing more. You don't have to tell them where you were or where you're going, just who you are.
You mean by my name, or can they ask me for my ID?
They can ask you for your ID and you have to produce it, yes.
Okay. Other point I wanted to say to the young lady was that we had the police officer, the chief from Queens South here, and he says when he gets stopped by the police in his own cell, that what he does, and this is what all police officers are taught to do, is come on the light in the car immediately, take the keys out, put them on the dashboard, and put your hands on the steering wheel. He says if you do that, they'll think that either you are married to a police officer or that you are a police officer, because that's the standard protocol for a police officer.
Oh, repeat, take your hand, turn off the video. No, I am serious.
No, you pull over. I'm talking about a marked police car now.
Yeah, unmarked, you go to a precinct. You don't pull over unmarked.
I'm talking about a marked police car.
Yeah.
You would pull over, immediately cut the lights on in the car so they can see clearly. Stop the car, take your keys out, put them up on the dashboard, and put your hands on the steering wheel and wait to be instructed. And they'll probably ask you, you know, police officer, because that's their standard protocol.
And then when you say, no, I'm not a police officer, can we give your name as the person who told us to do that?
Yeah.
We can say, Pastor Boyd told us. Well, that's very good advice, and it's sad that you have to go through all of this protocol and that you have to be the one to diffuse the situation. When they're the trained party, you're the layperson, you're the citizenry that they're sworn to protect and to serve. They work for you. I know it's hard to tell, but they actually work for you. And as a result of that, they should be the ones to talk down the scenario. But you know something, in many instances, they are trained and do know how to talk down the scenario as long as the person that they're stopping doesn't look like you. You've seen situations, and so have I, where people who are not from our community, push them, curse at them. I've seen a situation where a guy actually took the police who had their gun trained on him, jumped in their police car, which was running, they usually keep it running, jumped in their car, chased them down the block in their own car, and took off with the police car. But he didn't look like you. So it's not, when people always say, well, when you see that type of situation where something goes wrong and a person of color ends up dead, there's more training that's needed to be done, more sensitivity. I don't believe that. Because are all the black police officers or non-white police officers better trained than the white police officers? Why aren't we running around shooting white women? You don't hear about that. The one time you heard about 6 months ago about the Indian guy who shot the white woman in Oklahoma or whatever it was and killed her because there was some sort of call about a burglary. She called and they show up at her house and she comes out with her pajamas on saying, I called you and I think someone's being molested behind my house. I'm hearing it from my kitchen window and I think someone's being sexually molested. They turned around and shot and killed her. That is rare in their community. And he was a person of color. He was an Indian officer from East India who had been there about 18 years and became a police officer, and we don't hear anything more about him. So I don't know if he got the John Gotti neighbor treatment. You know, we don't hear about the neighbor who ran over Junior anymore. Well, we haven't heard about that officer any further, but that's a true story. It happened about 6 months ago in this country. And it was a big outcry from their community. But in our community, these things happen all the time. And we have to be trained, as Pastor Boyd said, in how to diffuse the situation, make the nice officer feel safe, and turn on the lights, and put your hands where everyone can see them, and put your keys there, because you don't want to be accused of trying to run them down. And you know, we have to think of ways to take away all of the margin of error, for them to mistake something for something that it's not. Meanwhile, in other communities, like I said, I've seen and heard stories of them kicking the police, cursing the police out, you know, completely acting ridiculous. And somehow they get taken alive without a bruise.
And giving bulletproof vests.
Remember Amadou Diallo coming into the vestibule of his house in the Bronx? Took out his wallet. When the police asked him to take out his wallet to show that proverbial ID, and when he did that, he caught 34 bullets. Now that's horrific, isn't it? And outrageous. And this was in a lighted vestibule of his building. And he was summarily executed by 4 undercover, plainclothes police cops who stopped him. To this day, we don't know why. That's tragic enough, but the biggest tragedy of all is that some grand jury somewhere in the Bronx, under the tutelage of Robert Johnson, said that that was justified. And none of them face any charges. And we've heard that on and on and on. So the point I make is that you want to keep the confusion down. They never seem to get that follow-up training that they also desperately need when it's us. And we continuously are under assault and attack, so you definitely want to keep the tension down. I said, you have to talk to them like you're rocking a baby to sleep. That's the mentality that our community has to have. And we can't go around and say, well, it's all fair, we're all one, and why is race always playing a factor? Because they've infused that. And I'm just telling you the truth. You don't need me to come here and sugarcoat anything. For that, you can call all those other lawyers. But this one keeps it real. By my client list, you know, I can't play games. I tell it like it is, not like I want it to be. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. So if a police officer does come to our home, should we let them in, or no? Can we let them in, or should we let them in? And then also, if they ask us to come outside, should we go outside?
Good question. Two good questions, actually. And what I would say to that is, the first one, you don't have to incriminate yourself with the police. They have to gather evidence against you. So when they come to your home, you don't have to let them in without a warrant. There's no right that they have to come into your house without a warrant. And if they do so, anything that they gather cannot be used. That part is true, and they can't get around that. Because a warrant is time-stamped, time and place. And it's very specific as to what they can look for, and therefore where they can look. So if they have a warrant to search for a gun, they shouldn't be looking under your breadbasket. You know, it has to be something that's logically consistent with the item for which they are searching. If they're looking for a human being, they shouldn't be putting their hands down the cookie jar, looking for drugs, or looking behind the toilet seat, things like that. Now, if they don't have a warrant, no, you do not have any obligation to let them in. And the way they usually get around that is by trickery. They will speak with you very softly and almost in a friendly manner to gain your confidence and your trust and to take you off your guard and say, would you mind if we step inside and talk about this that, your neighbors don't necessarily see? Once you say yes, then they can say, well, we saw the gun in plain sight. It's your word against theirs. Or they may have invited the gun with, one of their person themselves. And one of them is talking to you and the other one's walking through your house. Not with the warrant, but once you give them permission to come into your home, they're wandering around. And the one who's holding you at bay, in a friendly conversation in your living room over some tea and coffee, the partner's walking around discovering stuff. That later they can come back, even if they don't say anything to you. Go out and say, we saw this in that house, get a warrant, and then kick your door in and come back. So I would always suggest to people, and this is part 2 of your question, should we step outside with them? Well, you don't have an obligation to speak to them at all, at any time other than identifying yourself, like I already mentioned a few times. However, if you wish to speak with them, I always suggest to people, step outside into the public area. Close your door. And then have whatever conversation you want, within limits. But don't invite them into your home, because once you do that, you create the environment for them to make and state that they saw things in your home that they may be mistaken about and didn't actually see it. You create, you limit and minimize the possibility of your home becoming an issue if you simply step out of it or step onto the porch or whatever. Never invite them past your threshold if you can avoid that. Good question. Any other questions? Everyone is completely clear on their rights and knows A to Z, everything about interaction with the police? Good question.
Comment to me
Yes.
that you mentioned about not.
Okay, good, my sister.
Thanks. The comment you made about being calm, the latter part of last year, I was going to DMV office in Jamaica, and there's a precinct before the DMV office.
Right.
And as I was walking on the curb, there were 3 police officers having a conversation.
And as I got closer, the one that was facing me put his hands on his gun. So 3 officers are standing there, and I am just a young lady walking, going in that direction.
In
And
daylight?
Yeah, in daylight. It was like about 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and he placed his hands on his gun. Now the thing is, supposing now my cell phone had rang and I was going into my bag or something. So I just stayed calm and I continued to walk, and then he held his hand on his gun until I passed.
Because you are the threat, his parents told him when he was growing up in an isolated environment away from you. And when he decided to become a police officer, he didn't decide to become one to protect you, nor to serve you. You remain the threat that he was always told that you are. So whether you are a young woman who is going about her daily business, not even thinking about them, and he's at the, I assume this is the 113?
I think so. It's the one just before DMV on Jamaica.
Right.
103rd.
The 103. Okay, the 103. So he's there and surrounded by maybe dozens and dozens of cops within minutes, seconds really, of that location where he's at, because he's right at the precinct. He still feels the threat. So imagine if it's just you one-on-one in the dark of night. And that's what our young men in particular, but all of us in general have to confront and be aware of. And that's why I felt it's so important to come here today and to speak about this particular issue. There's a lot of things we could talk about. I could have talked about real estate sales and how to close a deal and how to get financing, or wills and trusts, and how to leave in descendants of your homes, because what's going on, and particularly in the Eastern Queens area, where there's a lot of gentrification happening now, a lot of these predatory investors coming in and taking our homes away, and the children have no place to live. They'll buy a home for cash, $500,000, which sounds like a lot of money, but it isn't, and certainly not in New York. And if you sell the home, you couldn't even afford to come back into it a week later. I could have talked about that. But this is life and death. And this, I had to think about which one would have been the priority. And I wanted to speak about this, but I am certainly willing to come back and talk about all these other areas that I'm not talking about today. And test to see the need for wills, so that you don't lose your property that you work so hard and long for years and years, getting up in the darkness and in the snow to clear your car, for go to work for 35 years. only to lose the property after you pass on because somebody in the family didn't pay the taxes for 6 months, and how to avoid that. So there's things to talk about, a lot. But this, I felt, was the way to start because these are things that can occur when any of us walk out of here today. So that's why I have to prioritize it, but there's a lot of stuff to really cover. A lot of things that's happening in central and eastern Queens where it's very difficult now, Queens, Brooklyn, Harlem, to identify the black community. It's hard to find, where is it? Because our communities are being decimated by everyone who's doesn't look like us and doesn't want to identify with us. Let's be real. Our homes are gone, our businesses, our churches. I want to talk about that. And I want to talk about how we can, those of us who still have homes, can hold on to them. Because every trick in the book is being used now. I'm sure those of us who are homeowners here, every weekend are getting flyers from investors. Sell your home, cash, God bless you. I mean, they'll say anything now. I've seen the flyer, God bless you, your family, happy holidays, Merry Christmas. And then you don't see these people after they get what they want, which is your property. And then they'll put in $100,000, $200,000 of renovations, and the house goes for $1 million after that. And what happens is that with one house, two houses, that's not such an issue. But when it becomes the entire neighborhood or 90% of the homes in the neighborhood, guess what? That's no longer our neighborhood because most of us can't afford to spend $1 million on a home. And if we could, the banks aren't going to give us the credit to buy it, but they're giving it to other people. So, look at what happened. Look at Sutton Boulevard. Now, I was born, I didn't mention this, but I was born about not even a mile from here in a hospital called Midland General Hospital, which I turned 56 yesterday. So 56 years ago yesterday, thank you. 56 years ago yesterday was on, I think, 90th Avenue and 175th Street. It's gone. There's a school there now. But the point I make is that I was here all my life and able to see the change. My offices, my law firm is on Sutton Boulevard, right at Hillside Avenue. And you're all welcome to come by and say hi, have coffee. Nora, Barbara, the staff, wonderful people. Kenya's met them. Some of you are clients. Some of you have been there. Good people. And it's a nice, clean, polished office. Not to brag, but I want to tell you that this is your house, not mine. So we just maintain it for you. You're all welcome to stop in. You don't have to be a paying customer that day. Come on in, stop in. Some of you are traveling from Manhattan or wherever you were, and that's the midpoint before you get onto that bus to go the rest of the way. Stop in and, catch up on the news, take a load off your feet, and have a cup of hot chocolate or coffee. Winter's coming.
We got one more question because we're short on time. So one more question and then we'll, right?
Yeah, but the point I wanted to make is that I've seen Sutton Boulevard where my office is at. I'm not just talking for no reason.
No,
Everything has a
I
point.
understand. No, we just have to.
Okay. Sutton Boulevard has now gone from where it was 10 years ago to now, it doesn't even look like the United States of America.
Right.
At all. And you're not welcome, by the way, there. So we need to stop these gentrification actions from happening where our own communities are becoming places where we're no longer welcome. You come out your door and people are looking at you like you're some sort of interloper, like you're intruding on their neighborhood. So I definitely would like to come back and speak to those issues at some point.
Tina, is it? Are you good? Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. God bless you all. I'll give you cards, and I'll be willing to answer any questions in private as well. I'll stay a few moments after, okay? God bless.